You keep choosing people who hurt you. Not once, not twice, but over and over again, like you're magnetically drawn to exactly the kind of person who will break your heart, drain your energy, and leave you questioning your own worth. And the most frustrating part, you can see it happening. You know they're bad for you. Your friends warn you. Your family expresses concern. Even you yourself can list all the red flags, all the reasons why this person is toxic for your mental health and emotional well-being. But you stay anyway. You make excuses for their behavior. You convince yourself that this time will be different, that you can change them, that underneath all their dysfunction and cruelty, there's someone worth saving. You tell yourself that love means fighting for people, that relationships require sacrifice, that maybe you're just being too sensitive or expecting too much. What if I told you that this pattern isn't about love at all? What if your attraction to toxic people isn't a character flaw or a sign that you're weak or stupid or broken? What if it's actually your unconscious mind trying to heal something that was wounded long before you even met this person? Carl Jung, the pioneering psychologist who mapped the depths of human consciousness, understood something about toxic relationships that could change everything about how you see your patterns. You're not choosing these people despite their toxicity. You're choosing them because of it. And your unconscious mind has a reason for doing this that's both heartbreaking and surprisingly hopeful. Jung understood that the human psyche doesn't just want to survive, it wants to heal. But sometimes, in its desperate attempt to resolve old wounds, the unconscious mind makes choices that look self-destructive from the outside, but make perfect psychological sense when you understand the deeper pattern at work. When you experience trauma, abandonment, or emotional neglect, especially in childhood when your nervous system was still developing, your brain made certain associations about what love looks like, what relationships feel like, what kind of treatment you deserve. These associations weren't logical or conscious. They were survival-based, formed during moments when you were too young or too overwhelmed to process what was happening to you rationally. So your nervous system learned to associate love with uncertainty, affection with earning it through suffering, attention with drama, and connection with chaos. Your brain literally wired itself to recognize these patterns as home, even when home was painful, unpredictable, and damaging to your sense of self. This is what psychologists call trauma bonding, the way your nervous system becomes addicted to the exact dynamic that originally hurt you, because that's the only version of connection it learned to recognize as real. The intermittent reinforcement of toxic relationships, the cycle of cruelty followed by affection, rejection followed by love bombing, abandonment followed by desperate reconciliation, triggers the same neurochemical response as addiction. Your brain releases dopamine during the good moments, creating an intense high that makes you forget all the pain that came before. And then when the toxicity returns, your brain craves that next hit of validation, that next moment of tenderness, that next promise that this time things will be different. Let me tell you about Maria, because her story illustrates this psychological trap with heartbreaking clarity. Maria was 28 years old and had been in 3 serious relationships, each one more destructive than the last. Her current boyfriend, David, was emotionally unavailable, prone to explosive anger, and had a pattern of disappearing for days without explanation, only to return with elaborate apologies and promises to change. Maria's friends couldn't understand it. She was intelligent, accomplished, kind-hearted. Why did she keep choosing men who treated her so poorly? What they didn't know was that David's behavior felt familiar to Maria in a way she couldn't consciously explain. It felt like home. Maria's father had been an alcoholic with severe anger management issues. Her childhood had been a constant cycle of walking on eggshells around his unpredictable moods, desperately trying to be good enough, quiet enough, helpful enough to prevent his next explosion. And when he wasn't angry, when he was sober and apologetic and promising to be better, those moments felt like pure love to her young nervous system. She learned that love meant uncertainty, that affection had to be earned through perfect behavior. That connection came through crisis and resolution, that the sweetest moments of tenderness followed the most painful moments of rejection. Her nervous system became wired to associate chaos with care, volatility with passion, and intermittent affection with deep love. So when Maria met David, Her unconscious mind recognized something familiar in his patterns. The way he would withdraw emotionally and then suddenly shower her with attention. The way he would create drama and then position himself as the one who could resolve it. The way he would make her feel like she had to constantly prove her worth to him, just like she had tried to prove her worth to her father. Her conscious mind knew this wasn't healthy, but her unconscious mind whispered, "This is what love feels like. This is how you know it's real." Jung's concept of projection explains another layer of why we're drawn to toxic people. Projection is the unconscious process of seeing in others what we cannot see in ourselves, both our disowned qualities and our unrealized potential. When you're attracted to someone who's emotionally unavailable, manipulative, or abusive, part of what's happening is that you're projecting onto them your own capacity for transformation and healing. You see their potential rather than their reality. You focus on who they could become rather than who they consistently show themselves to be. This isn't because you're naive or foolish. It's because your unconscious mind is trying to heal your own wounds by healing theirs. If you can save them, if you can love them into wholeness, if you can prove that even someone this damaged is worthy of love and capable of change, then maybe you can prove the same thing about yourself. The toxic person becomes a screen onto which you project your own need for healing, your own desperate desire to be seen and valued and chosen despite your flaws and wounds and imperfections. They become the representation of every part of yourself that you believe is unlovable, and by loving them, you're trying to love those rejected parts of yourself. This is why leaving toxic relationships feels impossible even when you know they're destroying you. It's not just about losing the person, it's about abandoning the hope of healing yourself through them. It's about accepting that you can't love someone into wholeness, which means confronting the terrifying possibility that maybe no one can love you into wholeness either. But here's what Jung understood that changes everything. The healing you're seeking through them can only come from within yourself. The love you're trying to earn from them is love you must learn to give to yourself. The acceptance you're craving from someone who consistently rejects you is acceptance you must cultivate in your own relationship with your own wounded parts. The toxic person isn't your healing opportunity, they're your mirror reflecting back the relationship you have with yourself. The science behind toxic relationship addiction is both fascinating and heartbreaking. When you're in a relationship with someone who gives you intermittent reinforcement, periods of withdrawal followed by intense attention, cruelty followed by love bombing, rejection followed by pursuit, your brain responds exactly like it would to cocaine or gambling. During the good moments, when they're paying attention to you, being affectionate, making promises about the future, your brain floods with dopamine, oxytocin, and other feel-good chemicals. This creates an intense high that feels more powerful than the steady, consistent love of a healthy relationship, because your nervous system has been conditioned to associate love with scarcity, with having to earn it, with the relief that comes after pain. But when they withdraw, when they become cold or cruel or absent, your brain goes into withdrawal. The levels of these chemicals crash, leaving you feeling desperate, anxious, and willing to do almost anything to get that next hit of validation and affection. This is why you find yourself obsessing over their text messages, analyzing their tone of voice, changing your behavior to try to win back their approval. Your brain has literally become addicted to the cycle. The uncertainty keeps you hooked because intermittent reinforcement is the most addictive reward schedule known to psychology. If someone treated you badly all the time, you'd leave. If someone treated you well all the time, you'd feel secure but not necessarily addicted. But someone who alternates between the two creates a neurochemical dependency that can be stronger than addiction to substances. This isn't a character flaw, it's a nervous system response. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is to seek connection and avoid abandonment. The problem is that your early experiences taught it to recognize toxic patterns as the most reliable form of connection available. The breaking point came for Maria not during one of David's explosive arguments or disappearing acts, but during what should have been a tender moment. He had just returned from one of his 3-day silent treatments full of apologies and promises to change. He brought flowers, cooked dinner, told her he loved her and couldn't live without her, and as Maria sat there listening to words she had heard dozens of times before, she suddenly felt like she was watching herself from outside her body. She saw herself at 8 years old, listening to her father make the same promises after one of his drunken rages. She saw herself at 16 making excuses for her father's behavior to her concerned teachers. She saw herself at 25 having the same conversation with her previous boyfriend that she was having now with David. For the first time, Maria could see the pattern clearly. It wasn't that she kept finding broken men who needed fixing, it was that she was unconsciously drawn to the specific kind of brokenness that felt familiar to her nervous system. She wasn't choosing David despite his toxicity, she was choosing him because his emotional unavailability felt like the only kind of love her wounded inner child knew how to recognize. But seeing the pattern was just the beginning. The harder realization was understanding that David couldn't heal the wound her father had created, because David didn't create that wound in the first place. The little girl inside her who felt unworthy of consistent love, who believed that affection had to be earned through suffering, who associated chaos with passion, that little girl existed long before David entered the picture. Maria realized that every relationship she'd ever been in was actually a relationship with her own unhealed trauma. David was just the current representative of a pattern that would continue until she learned to give herself the love she kept trying to earn from people who were incapable of giving it. Jung understood that healing doesn't come from analyzing your patterns intellectually, it comes from developing a different relationship with the wounded parts of yourself that created those patterns in the first place. The part of you that's drawn to toxic people isn't your enemy. It's a wounded child inside you who learned to associate love with pain, who developed these survival strategies when you were too young to know there were other options. This inner child needs compassion, not criticism. It needs understanding, not judgment. When you find yourself attracted to someone who's emotionally unavailable, instead of berating yourself for being stupid or weak, try asking yourself, what does this attraction tell me about what I learned love was supposed to feel like? When you catch yourself making excuses for someone's toxic behavior, instead of judging yourself for being naive, try asking what part of me is trying to heal itself through this person. When you realize you're addicted to the chaos of a toxic relationship, instead of calling yourself pathetic, try asking, what did my nervous system learn about what connection looks like? The goal isn't to shame yourself out of these patterns. Shame is what created them in the first place. The goal is to develop enough self-awareness and self-compassion that you can recognize when your wounded inner child is driving your choices and gently guide yourself toward relationships that honor your actual worth rather than confirming your deepest fears about yourself. This process isn't quick or linear. It requires grieving the childhood you didn't have, the parent who couldn't love you consistently, the safety you never felt. It requires learning to be the stable, loving presence for yourself that you never received from the adults who were supposed to provide it. Take a moment to pause here and really reflect on your own patterns. Think about the people you've been most intensely attracted to in your life. What did they have in common? What kind of treatment did they normalize for you? What did your nervous system learn to associate with love, passion, and connection? And more importantly, can you trace those patterns back to your earliest experiences of love and relationship? Can you see the wounded child inside you who developed these survival strategies when you were too young to know there were healthier options available? Share in the comments below, but only if it feels safe and healing for you to do so. What pattern are you finally ready to break? What kind of love are you ready to stop accepting? Your courage to look at these patterns honestly might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to begin their own healing journey. Maria's healing journey wasn't about finding the right person to replace David. It was about developing a relationship with herself that was so healthy and stable that toxic people no longer felt familiar or attractive to her nervous system. She started therapy not to analyze David's behavior, but to understand her own patterns and heal the wounds that made those patterns feel necessary. She learned to recognize when her wounded inner child was driving her choices and to pause long enough to ask herself, what does adult Maria need in this situation? Not what does 8-year-old Maria think she needs. She practiced setting boundaries not as walls to keep people out, but as guidelines for how she wanted to be treated in relationships. The most surprising part of Maria's healing wasn't that she learned to avoid toxic people, it was that toxic people stopped being attracted to her. When you heal your own relationship with yourself, when you stop radiating the energy of someone who believes they have to earn love through suffering, manipulative people lose interest. They can sense that their usual tactics won't work, that you're no longer available to play the roles their dysfunction requires. Maria eventually met someone who was consistently kind, emotionally available, and genuinely interested in her well-being. And the most shocking part, at first it felt boring. Her nervous system had become so addicted to chaos that healthy love felt flat, unexciting, not real enough. But she had done enough healing to recognize this response and push through it, to retrain her nervous system to recognize calm consistency as safety rather than indifference. Jung understood that healthy love doesn't feel like addiction because it doesn't activate your survival responses. Healthy love feels safe, which your nervous system might initially interpret as boring if it's been conditioned to associate love with uncertainty and chaos. Healthy love is consistent, which might feel unreal if you've learned that real affection has to be earned through suffering. In healthy relationships, you don't have to constantly prove your worth. You don't have to walk on eggshells or manage someone else's emotions to maintain their affection. You don't have to interpret mixed signals or wonder where you stand. There's no love bombing followed by withdrawal, no intense highs that require you to tolerate devastating lows. Healthy love allows you to be authentically yourself without fear of abandonment. It encourages your growth rather than requiring you to stay small. It sees your wounds and flaws without using them against you. It offers consistency without control, intimacy without enmeshment, support without codependency. But perhaps most importantly, healthy love doesn't promise to heal you or complete you or fix what's broken inside you. Instead, it creates a safe space where you can heal yourself, where you can learn to love your own wounded parts, where you can grow into the person you're meant to be without having to earn that growth through suffering. The people who are capable of healthy love aren't attracted to your wounds. They're attracted to your wholeness. They don't want to save you or be saved by you. They want to build something beautiful with you from a foundation of mutual respect, genuine affection, and shared value. Breaking free from toxic relationship patterns requires more than just deciding to choose better. It requires rewiring your nervous system's understanding of what love looks like, what safety feels like, what you deserve in relationships. This is deep, slow work that happens not just in your mind, but in your body, not just in your thoughts, but in your automatic responses. You have to grieve the fantasy of being loved into wholeness by someone else. You have to accept that no relationship, no matter how intense or passionate, can heal the wounds that were created before that person entered your life. You have to learn to be the consistent, loving presence for yourself that you never received from the people who were supposed to provide it. This doesn't mean becoming completely self-sufficient or never needing anyone. It means developing such a solid relationship with yourself that you can tell the difference between someone who wants to love the real you and someone who wants to use your wounds for their own psychological needs. The most powerful realization in breaking these cycles is understanding that your attraction to toxic people was never about them. It was about trying to heal something in yourself. Once you learn to heal that something directly through self-compassion, therapy, inner child work, and authentic relationships with people who see your worth, toxic people lose their magnetic pull over you. You stop being available for relationships that require you to abandon yourself. You stop being attracted to people who need you to stay wounded in order to feel powerful. You start recognizing red flags not as exciting challenges to overcome, but as information about incompatibility. So I want to ask you something that might change your life if you answer it honestly. Are you ready to stop trying to earn love from people who are incapable of giving it? Are you ready to grieve the fantasy of being saved by someone else and start learning to save yourself? Are you ready to discover what it feels like to be chosen by someone who doesn't need you to stay broken in order to feel whole? The cycle of toxic relationships can be broken, but it requires you to do the hardest thing you'll ever do: learn to love yourself the way you wished they would love you. Not as a consolation prize for being unable to find someone else to do it, but as the foundation that makes healthy love possible in the first place. Jung believed that the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are, not who you think you need to be to earn love, not who you were shaped into by trauma and survival, but who you actually are beneath all those wounds and adaptive strategies. If this message resonated with something deep inside you, if you recognized yourself in Maria's story or felt that familiar ache of recognition, let me know in the comments by writing "I choose healing." Subscribe for more content about psychology, trauma recovery, and learning to love yourself in a world that profits from your self-doubt. Remember, you are not broken for being attracted to toxic people. You are wounded, and wounds can heal. The love you've been seeking for people who can't give it has been waiting inside you all along. It's time to come home to yourself.